All right, let's talk about one of the most famous, and honestly, one of the most misunderstood molecules in our entire body, dopamine. You've heard the name a million times, but what is it really doing in there? Let's get into it.
So first things first, we gotta bust a myth right out of the gate. We always hear dopamine called the pleasure chemical. And yeah, it's definitely in the mix when we feel good, but that's not its main gig. Actually, that label is pretty misleading.
You know, this quote really nails it. It's from Dr. Anna Lemke at Stanford. See, dopamine isn't about the cozy feeling of satisfaction you get when you have something. Nope, it's the molecule of motivation. It's that antsy, restless chemical that drives you to want things, to chase them, to go after them. It's the engine of more.
Okay, so if it's the molecule of more, what does it actually look like? What is this stuff on a chemical level? Let's break it down.
Well, dopamine kind of has this cool double life. In the brain, it's a neurotransmitter, which is basically a chemical messenger that your nerve cells use to talk to each other. But it also moonlights as a hormone, traveling through your bloodstream to boss around all sorts of functions throughout your body. This dual role is exactly what makes it so incredibly important.
So check it out. On the left, you've got the simple 2D blueprint, and on the right, the 3D model. It's a pretty simple little molecule, really. It's made of two main parts. You got this six-sided ring called a catechol structure, and then this other bit called an amine group. It's a simple design, but oh man, it is incredibly powerful.
And you know what's wild? Our bodies whip this stuff up in a super efficient three-step process. It all kicks off with L-tyrosine, an amino acid you get from food. One enzyme messes with that, turning it into something called L-dopa. Then another enzyme jumps in, snips off a tiny piece, and boom, you've got dopamine ready to get to work.
So let's talk about what happens when this whole system is humming along perfectly. When your dopamine is in balance, it is, and I mean this literally, your own personal motivation engine.
I mean, it's the force that gets you off the couch to go after your goals. It helps teach you what works, reinforcing behaviors that get you a reward. It's absolutely crucial for controlling your body, for focusing your attention, for keeping your mood stable. It's that little voice in your head that says, hey, that was good, let's do that again, which, is the foundation of how we learn and remember pretty much everything.
Now, dopamine doesn't just splash around your brain randomly. It operates on specific highways, each with a different job. You've got the mesolimbic pathway. That's the famous one, the reward circuit. It lights up when you're anticipating something awesome, driving that feeling of desire. But then you have the nigrostriatal pathway. Its job is totally different. It's all about movement, letting you start and control your muscles. Same molecule, two totally different jobs.
But what happens when that motivation engine starts to sputter, when the well runs dry? Well, a lack of dopamine can have a huge effect on how we feel and function every single day.
You know that get up and go feeling? When dopamine is low, it just goes. Your motivation totally tanks. You might feel wiped out all the time, find it impossible to concentrate, feel kind of moody or anxious, and that awful feeling of not enjoying things you used to love? There's a word for that, anhedonia, and it's a classic sign that your dopamine is out of whack.
And look, those symptoms are bad enough, but when the actual factories in your brain that produce dopamine start to die off, well, the consequences become devastating.
And that brings us directly to one of the most well-known conditions tied to dopamine, Parkinson's disease. The tremors, the stiffness, the trouble moving, all of that is a direct result of those dopamine-making cells dying off in that movement pathway we just talked about, the substantia nigra.
The story of how we figured this out is like a great medical detective novel. Back in the 50s, scientists realized dopamine was its own special thing, a vital neurotransmitter. Then they connected the dots, finding that the brains of Parkinson's patients were severely depleted of it. This led to a stroke of genius. What if we gave patients L-dopa, the ingredient the brain needs to make its own dopamine? It was a game changer.
So that's what happens with too little. But what about the other side of the coin? What happens when the system is flooded with dopamine, or even worse, hijacked?
When dopamine levels are way too high, it can feel incredible at first. Total euphoria, boundless energy. But it can quickly flip into something darker. Aggression, wild impulsivity, not being able to sleep. It's like being stuck in overdrive, and that's just not sustainable.
And here's the critical part. This incredibly powerful system can be manipulated. Addictive drugs work by creating a massive, unnatural, lightning-fast spike in dopamine. It's like they hotwire the whole reward circuit. Your brain gets this signal and thinks, whoa, this is the most important, most amazing thing that has ever happened. We need more of this now.
Let's use a real-world example.
After dopamine delivers its message, it normally gets cleaned up and recycled by these things called dopamine transporters. Think of them like little vacuum cleaners. Well, cocaine comes along and basically jams the hose of the vacuum. The dopamine can't get cleaned up, so it just sits there, hammering the receptors over and over, creating that intense, prolonged high.
And this story of dysregulation doesn't stop at addiction. Serious imbalances in dopamine are also at the heart of conditions like schizophrenia. In fact, a lot of antipsychotic medications are what we call dopamine antagonists. Their entire job is to block dopamine receptors, to essentially turn down the volume on all that activity to help manage the symptoms.
So we've seen both sides of the story, right? Too little and too much. It all builds to a bigger picture, where dopamine isn't good or bad. It's all about balance. It's all about context.
And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, too little dopamine, and you're looking at apathy, fatigue, even serious motor problems like Parkinson's. On the other side, too much is linked to impulsivity, addiction, and even psychosis. The sweet spot, the healthy state, is right there in the middle. A delicate balancing act your body is trying to pull off 24/7.
But just when you think you've got this molecule pegged, you find out its story doesn't even end in the brain. It turns out dopamine has a whole other career, playing these vital roles all over your body. I mean, just look at some of its other day jobs. It helps your blood vessels chill out and widen. It tells your kidneys how to handle salt. It can dial down insulin production in your pancreas and even slow down your digestion. It even gets involved with your immune system. Who knew? It is so much more than just a brain chemical.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Dopamine is the molecule of more. It's the engine of pursuit. It's what drives us to want things. And that really just leaves one last question to think about. In your life, what does this powerful little molecule drive you to want?